In this video, 5 steps to become a successful C&I solar installer. I'm going to tell you how to successfully make the transition from being a residential and light commercial solar installer to a large commercial and community solar installer. I'm Tim Montague, host of the Clean Power Hour. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. I've helped dozens of technology companies, including numerous solar installers, and technology companies, including OEMs, software companies. And I am an expert in C&I solar. I cut my teeth on the C&I industry working with Continental Energy Solutions in Chicago from 2017 to 2021. And I helped that company go from 3 employees in the office to 15 employees. And I've now written a playbook so that you, the residential and light commercial installer, can make that transition yourself. This involves understanding the differences between resi and commercial, acquiring the necessary knowledge and skills, of course, building a network, developing a compelling value proposition, and mastering the sales process. So step 1, understand the differences. In the residential space, we're talking about 5 to 10 kW solar systems, usually on sloped roofs, like the picture you see here. And these are $20,000 to $50,000 sales. Good industry, fast-growing industry. Depends on the market, of course. Some markets are ebbing when others are flowing. That is what we call the solar coaster. So welcome. The C&I space is more about the 30 kW to 5 megawatts. A megawatt is 1,000 kW. And these are projects that could be $100,000 to $10 million or more. And it's apples and oranges. I mean, you do see some similarities, right? In commercial, like this school here in the lower middle, there are sloped roofs in commercial, which are very similar. So there are parallels. But then you get into large flat roof, and it's a totally different animal. But across the board, the major equipment is different. The tools and technologies you're using, the customer and their decision-making process are all very different. I'm going to give you a quick review of what are the types of solar systems, just so we know what we're talking about here. Again, residential is in the 5 to 20 kW. Small commercial, 20 to 50 kW DC. My first commercial project was 26 kW. Large commercial, 100 kW to 5 megawatts. And then we have a burgeoning small utility market in community solar. These are front-of-the-meter ground mounts in the 1 to 10 megawatt. 10 megawatts is on the order of 50 acres. And of course, solar projects come in roof, ground, carport. They can be grid-tied, or as we would say, behind the meter, or they can be off-grid. The solar industry actually got its start in off-grid systems. And back in the 80s and 90s, the technology was available. It was just very expensive. And the modern solar industry started in about 2010. So we're 14 years into that journey and, riding the technology adoption curve. The cost of equipment has come down dramatically, and more states are laying the groundwork for a healthy industry. It's all about legislation. And you're going to hear me beat on that drum regarding state organizations and state legislation. It's very important that you, the commercial solar installer or aspiring commercial solar installer, get involved with your statewide or regional organizations to be part of that effort. Again, we have roof, ground, carport, and fixed tilt versus tracker. Here, let's just go clockwise from the top left. You see a flush mount roof there in northern Illinois. That's a beautiful school project. And it's just gorgeous, right? And it's so symmetrical and would be familiar to residential installers, just a lot bigger. You're dealing with many more larger panels. And so you're using different equipment for getting those panels to the roof. You're using cranes instead of ladders. You're using scaffolding oftentimes with commercial rooftops. Seldom used in residential. You see here in the middle, top middle, fixed ground mount. This is a community solar project in Western Illinois, but could be a behind the meter ground mount. I have some case studies that will show you behind the meter ground mounts. Then we have carport here on the upper right hand side. I love carport solar. It's such a great repurposing of a parking lot. And this was new construction in the Chicago suburbs. But the caveat with carport is that it is relatively expensive. Could be twice as much as traditional rooftop solar on a install basis per watt. So love carport, just a little pricey. Flat roof, project near and dear to my heart. Simmons knife here. There's a straight down from the roof post-construction and a shot from the roof itself. Flat roof is the vast majority of what you're going to see in commercial rooftop solar. And so the racking is very different than in flush mount sloped roof. Sometimes it's attached. Sometimes it's ballasted. We use what's called ballast blocks. And those are just bricks that weigh the array down on the roof so the wind doesn't blow the array off the roof. Trackers are very popular. They have swept the ground mount industry. Trackers are now, I think, 96% of megawatt scale ground mount solar in the United States. You get more productivity out of a tracker. And this is just a torque tube, a tube that points north-south and is flat to the ground, and then it tracks east in the morning and west in the afternoon and straight up at noon. So you're getting about 10 to 15% more energy per kWp out of that array, which is why trackers have come in. And then in the rare case, you will see double axis trackers down here in the far right. This is a small business that makes a heat pump based ERV, energy recovery ventilator, that I did a lot of work with. And they designed and installed this tracker themselves. They're all mechanical engineers. And they also have a fixed tilt array that hangs off the edge of their building. I don't have a photo of that here, but trackers are great when you want to get maximum density. And obviously it's tracking both east-west and north-south. And the north-south is tracking over the season, so that angle changes very gently. And then in the summer, it's pointing more flat. And in the winter, it's pointing more south. The reason double axis trackers are not more common is, again, the cost. Money talks in the solar industry, and especially in the commercial solar industry. After all, most businesses are in existence to turn a profit. And so looking at the ROI and ROI statistics like internal rate of return or net present value are de rigueur in the commercial solar industry, and you have to familiarize yourself with how business owners are going to measure the payback of a solar project. Everybody wants a solar project, generally speaking, because it saves them money, okay? And it helps them be more sustainable. It reduces their carbon footprint, money, and the environment. And then, of course, it's going to be good for people and their constituents, their employees, the community, et cetera, the environmental benefits, social and environmental benefits. But I never lead with those aspects. I always lead with the money or sometimes the environment if I know that they have a strong sustainability agenda. Step 2, acquire the necessary knowledge and skills. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And that's why so many residential and light commercial installers are very fearful of getting into large rooftop solar. It's easy to get out over your skis. And so I'm here to help you become more familiar and feel more comfortable chasing and landing larger projects. Check out all of my content and more about me at cleanpowerhour.com. I am Tim Montague, the host of the Clean Power Hour. Love to hear from my listeners. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. So, the knowledge and skills. This is, for example, about major equipment. Everything about commercial solar is different. The racking is different. As I mentioned, flat roof racking. Some brands that are common in flat roof, like Unirack or Panelclaw, you may not have heard of in the residential space, where Iron Ridge is the dominant player. Now, Iron Ridge and Panelclaw have the same parent company, which is a European company, so there is a connection. But the racking, like I said, is going to be ballasted oftentimes with flat roof, but it can be attached. And there are reasons why you would want to do attachments. In California, attaching is quite common because of the seismic requirements. Here in the Midwest, we would do attachments if we're trying to reduce the load, the mechanical load on the roof. So it's a technique that we use to use certain technology to lighten the load and make a project more feasible. And then there's inverters. String inverters, sure, as a residential installer, you're familiar with some string inverters like SolarEdge, which is one of the dominant string inverter companies, and their use of optimizers. And then microinverters are very, very common. Microinverters not used pretty much at all in commercial solar. It's all about string, and the string manufacturers are different. I would encourage you to check out Chin Power Systems. They are the number one three-phase string inverter manufacturer in the United States. Now, types of roofs and facilities, of course, are more varied, and so you're just going to have to familiarize yourself, and I would say befriend a good commercial roofer. There's a variety of reasons why roofing and solar are like peanut butter and jelly. You have to make sure that your solar installation is not in any way going to jeopardize the existing roof. We are often retrofitting onto an existing roof. And so you have to familiarize yourself with all these different types of materials. And there's still sloped roof, but there's often flat roof. Roof condition, of course, is a major factor, and that's true for the residential solar installer. You're very familiar with this, and you want to install solar on a roof that's less than 10 years old. That's a good rule of thumb in both residential and commercial. Roof condition in commercial is, I like to say, the bane of our existence, because roofing is expensive. It's not quite as expensive as installing a solar array, but there are some tricks of the trade. You can combine the roofing and the solar into a single CapEx and take the investment tax credit, which is a major federal incentive for the solar industry here in 2024. You can get up to 60%, depending on the geography and the off-taker of ITC. The base of the ITC is 30%, and then it goes up to 60%. So anyway, you want to familiarize yourself when you're working on a project very early on in the process. And I have a course about this on HeatSpring on how to qualify commercial projects. You have roof versus ground, of course. Many commercial projects do go on the ground. Let's say you have a factory and they don't want to put anything on their roof, or the roof is too old to solarize, but they have a field next to the factory. Put a solar array on the field. This is quite common, especially in more rural parts. There are many factories in rural America, and there are good reasons for this. The labor is cheaper, construction is cheaper, and you have more access to real estate for the possibility of expansion. Real estate is cheaper. So I know it for those city dwellers, this may be news to you, but rural America is dotted with thousands of large factories. By large, I mean 100,000 square feet plus, up to 1 million square feet, factories and warehouses. And then, there's pros and cons of both roof and ground. There's no perfect answer. Rooftop solar in general is going to be a little more affordable and a little faster to install. Ground mount is more visible, more accessible, easier to maintain, and install. So that's an advantage. It's just going to be a little more expensive on the front end because there's more permitting involved in ground mount solar. You have to learn how to quickly and accurately price and estimate commercial solar projects, and that may be a muscle that you just don't have yet. That's really what this transition is about, is building some new muscles and strengthening some existing muscles that you didn't know you have maybe. And then the installation techniques and equipment, of course, are going to be different. Of course, there are a lot of parallels between commercial and residential solar, no doubt, okay? But like I said, at the top here, major equipment is different. The panels are larger. The panels are longer and heavier. You can no longer do a single man carry with a commercial panel, generally speaking. You have to have two workers carrying the panel. Your craning equipment, you have to have a much bigger laydown area. It's a bigger project. It's more involved. It's more complex. So it's truly something that you want to work your way into, right? It's great to work your way into the light commercial space and then dip your toe, win a 50 kW, 100 kW job before you bite off that megawatt scale. But you can quickly go from doing 50 kW projects to doing 900,000 kW projects. Absolutely doable. My customer, Greenlink in Rockford, Illinois, is doing this as we speak. As I mentioned, there are differences in the major equipment. We have 60 cell modules in residential, 72 or 144 cell in commercial. 144 is just a split cell module. They split the cells in half. It allows them to get more power density on the panel. So the dimensions and the weight are different. Really approaching the size of a sheet of plywood with some of the large format modules that are coming out now. As I mentioned, rail-based is the standard for flush mount. Iron Ridge being the common company. Commercial uses panel claw or Unirac. And then for fixed tilt, we have Unirac or APA. APA is a company out of Ohio. You probably never heard of them if you're not doing a lot of ground mount solar. Great company for fixed tilt ground mount. Now, if you get into trackers, there's, two very clear market leaders. That's Nextracker and Array Technologies, but also a bunch of newer comers, Solar Flex Rack, Omco being two of my favorites. So you just have to familiarize yourself with these other manufacturers and types of equipment. I think I'll move on. All right, so quick aside here. What is the best type of a facility to solarize? Any roof that has exposure to the sun can be solarized. It's just a question of, is the roof in good condition? The rule of thumb is less than 10 years old. Or does it need to be augmented or replaced? Of course, if it needs to be replaced, that's where using the ITC and the combined CapEx comes into play. That is an acceptable tax strategy. You always want to consult or encourage your customer to consult their tax professional. You yourself, as a solar installer, are not a tax professional. You always have to make that caveat, but just know that it is an acceptable practice by the IRS. You want obstruction-free roof or ground. And I'm neutral. I don't have a preference one way or the other. Most commercial solar is going on the roof, but if you can do ground, that's a wonderful solution. It's highly visible and accessible. And then where is the project going to be is a big deciding factor because solar is regional. We have maybe 15 good solar states in the United States out of 50 states right now. And those good states, quote unquote, have a few foundational elements. They have good retail net metering, meaning the value of solar electrons are given full value equivalent to retail value of electricity. Now, in California, they just took that away, they reduced the value of solar by 70%. And so NEM 3, as it's known, has been a wrecking ball for the residential solar industry. It has caused some other changes. The attachment rate, for example, of storage has gone way up. So, it is what it is, so to speak. And many installers are getting out of residential and getting into commercial. If your state still has good retail net metering, hooray, ride that wave. I live in Illinois. I am an expert on the Illinois market. I work nationally, so I keep my finger on the pulse. If you don't have net metering in your state, you probably don't have a robust solar industry. It is very foundational. But on top of that, you want state incentives. These are generally going to be, in early days, renewable energy credit. These are cash incentives. One REC is 1 megawatt hour of electricity. So in markets like New York and Massachusetts and New Jersey and Illinois and Minnesota and Maryland and Maine, there are or were RECs driving those markets or variants thereof. An alternative to renewable energy credits is a feed-in tariff, which is very analogous. You put a special price tag on solar kWh, on solar electrons, which gives consumers and business owners an incentive to buy into solar. It shortens the payback period. That's the bottom line. There are two things that really shorten the payback period. The cost of energy, okay, what are you paying per kWh? Mostly the supply charges. You cannot attack things like demand charges, even though they might be a significant portion of a solar bill, of an electricity bill. So the cost of electricity and then incentives. Those are the two things that really drive a shorter payback period. Here's one of my case studies, and check out my courses on HeatSpring because I have a bunch of case studies there as well. This is Walnut Acres Nursing Center in Stevenson County. Very lovely project. But you see on the right-hand side a view from Google Maps, right? The facility has all these funky wings. And so when we looked at this, we went ahead and did an initial design on that roof, but it's very complicated. And the roof wasn't in great condition. And so we quickly discovered that they owned this field just to the east of the facility, to the south and west. And that's where we ended up going. And we squeezed in, I think, close to half a megawatt, 450 kW DC. Even in the final hours, we were tweaking the design to pack in the panels. We ended up shortening the row distance and reducing the tilt angle. Typically in ground mount here in the Midwest, we're doing 30-degree tilt for fixed tilt, but we went to 25, which allowed us to reduce the row spacing and pack in. We achieved about 70% offset, meaning the array will produce about 70% of the electricity that the facility consumes, which isn't bad. You're always gunning for 100% offset, but you can't always get there. So you take what you can get, so to speak, and just a lovely project. They're really happy with the result, and it's just a feel good. It's feel good for the community. It's reducing the nursing center's bill. This is a public facility, and that's money that they can invest in other things, other upgrades to the facility or other facilities that they manage. This is kind of a no-brainer, right? A very open south-facing roof is ideal. And metal roofs to boot, especially standing seam, but there's a variety of profiles for metal roofs that are all good for solar, but a standing seam is probably my all-time favorite because it's just very simple. You're just clamping onto that seam with what's called a C-clamp, and then attaching an L-foot to that, and that attaches to your racking. A little more about good versus bad or in-between roofs. This is a hospital, Swedish Covenant Hospital on the north side of Chicago, and this was a rehabilitation facility. It was scheduled to be re-roofed And so we were delayed a little bit by the re-roofing, and as you can see, there's a lot of equipment on that roof. A lot of air handlers, a lot of HVAC equipment. So it's not ideal. A lot of vents. You see this patchwork, right? All those squares where there's a missing panel, those are vents. So you're dancing around the equipment, but we were able to offset about 30% of the load of the facility. It's a low-rise, I think 3-story. It's kind of like a gym. There's a pool, there's a track, there's exercise equipment, and people are getting back on their feet. So, and here's a shot of that same project in the middle of winter when we were installing it. I think this was January. You see the frost melting off the panels. This was a 5-degree tilt project. We wanted to pack in as many panels as we could, so that was a technique that you must put in your bag of tricks, going from 10 to 5. In flat roof solar, the standard is 10 degrees, and most flat roof racking companies will offer a 10 or a 5. And by going to 5, you're able to reduce the row space and pack in more solar and get more electrons. It has a downside. It is harder to install. The panel is lower to the ground where you're doing the wiring, and so there are trade-offs, absolutely. Another beautiful roof. This was a dormitory with a gymnasium in the middle at North Central College, and this project on the right here. But it was designed to be solarized, and that's pretty obvious here. You have a little bit of equipment on the perimeter, and this project got a battery also, which you can't see very well here, but just nice big open. You have to put walkways by code, so that's why there are walkways, and that facilitates either first responder activity in the event of an emergency or maintenance. And so in general, we're just looking for open space, fewer obstructions, less shading. Newer roof is better. And river rock, I mentioned over here on the left, that's one of the types of roofs that you will run into quite a bit in commercial roofs. And this was a project that got re-roofed, and they tore off the river rock and installed a PTO membrane, which is this white, lovely membrane. So you can solarize river rock. You have to generally sweep the rock away from where the racking is going to sit. And so it's complicated, but something that you will run into. The cost of installation, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there are some good resources out there if you want to kind of figure out where pricing is in your market. NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, is part of the DOE. SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, that's our national trade organization in the commercial solar industry. IREC and ACES. ACES is the American Solar Energy Society, which is also a trade organization, but it's more residential oriented than commercial oriented. So I would encourage you to check out SEIA. But all of these organizations do research and publish papers. And, in general, we're talking $3 to $4 a watt here in the early 2020s. And that turns into $20 to $50K per project. Small commercial, $2 to $3 per watt. And then large commercial, $1.50 to $2 a watt. And then utility scale can get into the sub $1 a watt. Here we have some data, I believe, from NREL, but where they're showing the soft costs, the labor costs, the hardware and balance of system, the inverters, the modules, and additional costs. And so we've got, the major costs in a solar project are the labor might be 25%, equipment, modules, inverters, racking, permitting, marketing, management. Those are the soft costs, and then overhead and profit. And, you do see a nice trend here, right? From 2010 to 2020, the price of fixed tilt utility scale PV came down from $4.75 to less than $1 in a decade. That's insane, right? That's what we call the cost adoption curve. The technology is maturing, and the amount of it being sold or bought is going up. And as you double the amount of installations, the price gets reduced by 25%. So this is common in all forms of technology. All technologies go through that cost adoption curve. And then NREL gives you this little chart which shows how that they arrive at total costs of things like equipment, labor, and indirect labor costs, total PII. I can't remember what that is. I thought I had a call out for PII, but permit, inspection, and interconnection, and then overhead. So you see the major buckets: equipment, labor, permitting, and interconnection, and then overhead and profit. Step 3, build a strong network. This may seem like a no-brainer, and you're like, Tim, what are you talking about, man? Of course, I'm a master networker. Well, you may find that when you're a residential installer, you're very focused on a certain methodology for generating leads or buying leads. And that works, right? In C&I, the ways that we generate leads are going to be different. You need to get involved with and attend national industry events. These are known as RE+. That is a series of regional events and a big one, a big national event every September, either in Anaheim or Vegas. But then some of these regional events like MNCEA are really good. If you're in the upper Midwest, please go to MNCEA. CCSA, this is a community solar event. This year it was in Denver. So if you want to get involved with small utility, these are 1 to 10 megawatt projects. CCSA is a great industry organization for that. And then we have a lovely event here in Chicago called Midwest Solar Expo. So those are examples of regional events. And then these organizations, you want to become a member of SEIA and then the state or regional chapters of SEIA. So you're probably familiar with your state organization. If you're not, look it up. And some states are part of regional. So, for example, there's a Mid-Atlantic Solar Industry Association, which includes several Mid-Atlantic states like Maryland and New Jersey. And you just need to know your territory. Consider joining a buying co-op like Amicus. Check it out, Amicus. They are a network of businesses that do cooperative buying, so you can access major equipment more affordably, and you can tap into a collective brain trust of non-competitive companies from other markets around the country and learn what are the best practices that they're using to win this game of C&I solar. And then I've found that it's great to build relationships with other experienced commercial installers who are your aspirational peers. Not all of them will befriend you or play nice, so to speak, but many will. And I would just encourage you, if you haven't tried this, to do it. And you'll meet them at your state organization, and those state organizations are often hosting networking events. I'm about to go to a summer solstice event for ISEA, the Illinois Solar Energy Association, or the Illinois Solar and Storage Association, as it's now known. You can cultivate relationships with property managers, real estate investors, general contractors, and solar developers. I want to highlight solar developers. Like if you're a C&I installer in a state that has or is going to have community solar, that is a fantastic opportunity. And it's one that you will just not have thought of if you're very focused on residential and light commercial. You could easily go from installing 3 to 5 megawatts to installing 25 megawatts if you get involved in the community solar industry or large C&I. It's a both and. And connect with sustainability professionals. All cities, 100,000 people or more are going to have a sustainability professional these days. Those folks become tremendous focal points for local business owners. When local manufacturers want to get into some emerging technology around sustainability, they call the sustainability manager. And so take that person to coffee or lunch on a regular basis and get to know them so that they know that you're an installer that does commercial projects. Now, you can also leverage your existing residential clients to identify commercial opportunities. Think about it, because those people that have a home also work for companies or own companies that may own facilities that want to install solar. And so tapping into your residential owner market and network is vital. And then ultimately, from these relationships, you are going to ask for referrals. You always have to ask. I mean, some people will spontaneously give you referrals because they think that way, but 9 out of 10 times you're going to have to ask. Like the saying goes, if you don't ask, you don't receive. Ask for the referral. Step 4, develop a compelling value proposition. Again, you might go, oh, duh, of course. I'm a business owner. I have to have a value proposition, a unique value proposition. Trust me, every company's value proposition is going to be slightly different. Yours could be better. I help companies develop compelling value propositions that's going to differentiate you from your competition. Your competition may be 5 years ahead of you. It doesn't mean that you can't chase them and get in the game. Okay? But to do this, you're going to have to really up your game. You're going to have to understand the value proposition from a commercial facility owner's perspective, right? This is about reducing their spend on electricity, targeting supply charges, lowering a power bill by 50 to 75%. No smoke and mirrors here whatsoever. You cannot overpromise, underdeliver. My mantra is underpromise, overdeliver. But you have to become familiar with some of these statistics that businesses use to measure capital projects. This is a capital project. They're looking at simple payback period. They're looking at net present value, internal rate of return. And I go over these in my course on HeatSpring, Selling and Developing Commercial Solar. Check it out at heatspring.com. I think I have a slide later on showing that course. But you have to be competitive, okay? But you don't have to be the lowest cost solution. In fact, I would dissuade you from being the low cost solution in the commercial space. It's good to be one of the lower. You don't want to be the highest. Generally speaking, if you're gold plated, you will not win opportunities because trust me, when business owners are getting quotes, they're going to get several quotes. So you want to be in the zone. You want to be competitive. You don't have to be the cheapest. Being the cheapest is not best. You want to differentiate yourself on customer service, on responsiveness, on adding value, on showing up when you say you're going to do something, actually doing it. And then another way to differentiate yourself is to be a solar plus plus installer, meaning you don't just install solar, you install solar and batteries, solar and EV chargers. EV charging infrastructure is a huge opportunity. Solar and heat pumps. Heat pumps are incentivized now at the federal and many times state level. And so we're electrifying the HVAC industry with heat pumps, basically making the transition away from gas furnaces to electric furnaces using heat pumps. Be familiar with your competition and be better. A little more about developing your value proposition. I mentioned this before, underpromise and overdeliver. This is vital. You absolutely must underpromise and overdeliver to your customers. You will not get word of mouth if you don't do this. Every customer, right, is a source of potential leads. And how they perceive your company and the project in general is going to determine whether or not they give you word-of-mouth referrals. Do invest in your employees. Pursue training and certification. On the certification front, NABCEP is the gold standard. North American Board Certified Energy Practitioners is the organization. They have many certifications. For installers, the standard is PVIP, PV Installation Professional. Also for the sales team, sales and business development, and some of the management, you might want to pursue PV Technical Sales. That's the credential that I hold. And then PV Associates is the ground level. Everybody in the company should have the PV Associates. It's relatively easy, but it creates a floor. It ensures that everybody in the company has a basic understanding of the solar industry, how it works, and what are the expectations and what are the best practices. You want to create a culture of win-win-win. Yeah, some competition between sales team members is good and healthy, but in general, you want to create a culture of we're on the same team and we're here to win as a team. If there's a lot of one-upmanship or backstabbing or politics, it is going to create friction and hold you back. So create a win-win environment and you will go further faster. Develop an SOQ, a statement of qualifications. I help companies with this. It is a marketing piece. It is extremely important to put your best foot forward when delivering a proposal or prior to a proposal, a way to set yourself apart, having a great SOQ. And if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can send you some examples of SOQs. Here's that course I've mentioned a few times, Selling and Developing Commercial Solar. It's a 5.5-hour course on HeatSpring, and it covers all this material and much, much more. So please check it out at heatspring.com. And you can also find links on the training tab at cleanpowerhour.com. Step 5, master the sales process. This is a much bigger sale. It's a much longer sales cycle than small commercial or residential. So you have to really build this muscle of consultative selling. Consultative selling is simply creating more dialogue, okay, and focusing on value, not selling a widget. It is a relationship-oriented form of sales. So your customer has a problem. They're spending money on energy. The answer is, well, you can create more efficient uses of energy by, for example, retrofitting LED lights, or you can reduce the amount of electricity usage by installing rooftop solar. It's a both and, right? So anyway, you need to understand your customer's needs, goals, and challenges by asking open-ended questions. What are your priorities? That's an open-ended question. How would you pursue funding a capital project, or what is your process for developing capital projects? Be prepared to navigate a longer sales cycle. It could be years. You have to plant a lot of seeds because many of these projects are going to languish for 12 to 48 months, literally. Years in the making, commercial solar projects. There are so many things that can derail a commercial solar project because we're talking about dollar figures that are substantive to the company and can be used for other things. When you're going to spend $1 million on solar, you could also spend $1 million on other facility upgrades and expanding the facility, moving it, hiring, doing R&D, many other things. So be prepared. And also, you have to engage with multiple decision makers. Of course, if the company is tightly held, a privately owned, tightly held company, that's an ideal customer. Fewer decision makers is better. Okay, but nonetheless, there's generally speaking going to be more decision makers in a business deal than in a residential. You're at the kitchen table in residential solar with the homeowner and maybe the couple, if it's a husband and wife, right? In commercial, you're dealing with the CFO, the facilities manager, the COO, the CEO, and maybe a board member or some silent owner. And then using tools like energy modeling, software is vital. You're already using some kind of design tool. Maybe it's Aurora. In commercial solar, helioscope is much more common and preferred. Now, those two companies have, Aurora bought helioscope a few years ago, so they're owned by the same company, but they're still quite different tools. But anyway, there are other platforms that you need to integrate into your toolbox to effectively model commercial solar or solar and storage. I can help you identify and implement those tools. So in conclusion, this is a transition that you absolutely can do. I would encourage you to learn more about the C&I solar space. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love chatting with installers. The rewards are incredible, right? You can do dozens of megawatts per year instead of a handful of megawatts. If you're an ambitious resi installer, you might be doing, 1 to 10 megawatts. In commercial, you could be doing 10 to 50. And then developing a very keen, sharp, unique value proposition is going to go a long way. Ultimately, you're going to make a bigger impact on the energy transition, and that's something that I'm here to help you take a stand for. Work with me, and let's speed the energy transition. I'm Tim Montague. I want to thank you, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar.